What's your favorite thing to do with your daddy?
Play and
Play what?
hide and seek.
Can you say a little louder?
And insert
Hide and seek. And then, okay, what does your daddy do for work? Million. Does he work with men?
out.
Do you have some idea what he does for men?
Yeah.
What?
Thanks for eating.
It takes meetings? And what does he do? What do you think he does in those meetings? Why does he take meetings?
I don't know.
Do you think I helped men maybe?
Uh,
What do you think I helped him with?
No.
Okay. The next question is, what would you like your daddy to do more of?
Everything. Here. Oh, actually, I know. Either you want to tell her.
Give you more Nutella? Okay.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Super excited to chat with Pete Armstrong today. Father of three. I'm really looking forward to chatting with him. Our pre-call or our pre-chat right before this was, it's telling me that we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a good chat. So I'm looking forward to it. So Pete, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us about who you are, tell us about your family and also your business.
Got it, man. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Looking forward to chatting and, sharing with the world or whoever listens to this podcast, some things that it can help them be better businessmen and dads, right? Who am I and a little bit about my fam and my biz. I'm Pete Armstrong. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. Born and raised in Milwaukee, though. I moved here about 10 years ago. I love it. As a kid, I was into sports. Always play more recreational than just organized, but I love sports. Was always kind of like the class clown. Kind of always one of the leaders in the groups. But also grew up in a challenging household. I was out of the house as much as possible. Riding my bike, playing tag, playing sports, doing drugs, all the things as a kid. And then I think just in my 20s, I was in the restaurant industry. I was a bar manager, bartender, front of house manager, server, always in like higher end restaurants. Didn't have a degree, just went straight to the restaurant industry. And then I quit the restaurant industry and got a managed position in a commercial cleaning company. And that was connected through a customer of mine at this high-end restaurant that I worked at. And I did that gig. I was a manager for about 2 years. That was awesome. I learned a lot that I was like, I don't want to work nights anymore. I want to be home with my family because I became a parent around that time. And around that time, I became a dad for the first time. This was in 2005. I was about 25 years old. My first daughter, who is graduating this Saturday from high school, which is kind of crazy.
Congrats.
It's bittersweet. Thank you. And then, I was in this business for a while. Then I was laid off my job in 2010. But in 2010, man, it was kind of a big year because in the fall of 2009, I broke up with the mother of my children. I had 2 children. My son was born in 2008. And he was born with some pretty serious birth defects. So he spent about 6 weeks in NICU. So that was a pretty life-changing experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then about a year-ish later, I broke up with the mother of my children. Bring us to 2010. My son was about a year and a half. He was doing okay. But he became basically a single dad. And I ended up tearing my ACL on January 2nd of 2010, playing basketball, which was one of my favorite sports. And then on Monday, I got laid off from my job. And I was like, what the, what?
Mm-hmm.
And after getting the evaluation on my knee, I just realized I'm going to need surgery. I'm a good candidate for a job. And I'm a single parent. So I decided to go back to school in 2010 and pursue an undergraduate degree. And I moved out of my our house. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with my 2 kids, and I sold my car. I bought a bike with the Burley, and I carted my kids around in that to and from school. This was in Milwaukee, and I went to UW Milwaukee. And yeah, man, it was tough. You know, I lived on the 3rd story of a non-elevator building, old school Milwaukee apartment building, and I can remember days, Adam, carrying one kid in my arm and my crutch, like coming up the stairs, and my 4 or 5-year-old daughter's like carrying groceries, and it's like, damn, man, it's gotta get better. It's gotta get better.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
At the time, though, it wasn't that bad. It's just, I think, because I was in this small space with just my kids, and I can't even get a little emotional thinking about it, but just like, it was just cool to like be with my kids like constantly. I was probably lonely, maybe at the time in hindsight. But yeah, I got my degree, my undergraduate, and I was the first person in my family to get a college degree. So I was a first generational college student, even though I'm a white male. That just wasn't what people did in our family, And so that was really cool. I felt proud of myself. During that time, I was also invited to do grad school, which was very surprising for me, because for me, I was in high school. I barely went to school. I skipped school. Troubled family, so I was out on the streets. I was selling drugs, doing drugs. So for someone like me to go to grad school was pretty surprising. And I did it. Even I didn't believe in myself, but people believed in me, which was probably for the first time ever that I can really see someone believe in me, and that was really cool. And all this time, man, I was a single dad. The mother of I had primary placement of my 2 kids. The mother of my children decided in early 2010, actually, when I tore my ACL and lost my job, and I decided to go back to school. About a month later, she's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant, and I'm moving to St. Louis with my boyfriend." And I'm like, "What?" But I got a lawyer, and I was able to we did shared custody, and I got primary placement. And throughout my entire, returning adult into education, I was a single dad. And I was on all the programs, man. On all the financial aid, what you want to call it, welfare. I did whatever I could to get that degree and take care of them kids. Yeah. And we lived in a great neighborhood. We did all the things. And I met in about 2014, I think it was. I was in grad school, and I have been struggling with pornography the majority of my life, and casual sex. So it's just, in hindsight, I learned that was my coping mechanism, right? It's a way in which I found relief. But in 2014, I went and saw a therapist for my first time in my life. And he helped me understand, you have childhood trauma, you have anxiety, you have depression, you're addicted. And I was like, so life this isn't for everybody? Like, not everyone feels this way?
Yeah.
Funny, not funny, right? And man, I was able to walk away from porn in 2014 after a couple months working with him, and I haven't went back. So it's been 10 years, almost to the day, as a matter of fact.
Congrats, that's awesome.
So that was really helpful, and thank you. I heard that. The crazy thing is, I met a woman about 3 months later in grad school, and it went well. She started almost being a part-time mother to my children, and she got a job in Madison, and she invited us. We both got our masters. She got her master's, I got my master's, and she got a job in Madison, and she invited us to come live with her. And that was a difficult decision, because I was born and raised in Milwaukee. My entire family network, as you can imagine, as a single parent, I need so much help. I had my family, and I also had my kid's mother. Their side of the family also lived in Milwaukee, and were instrumental in helping me raise Francis and Etienne. Moved to Madison, got a gig at UW-Madison in the area of my master's research, which was just insane. Like, exactly what I researched is the exact job I got at UW-Madison, which was really Just couldn't believe it. Very ironic. And then I had another child with my wife. We got married about 6 months after moving to Madison, and then we had a child about a year later. And I was working at UW-Madison for many years. And 2020, COVID hit, and it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back on my marriage. The kids were in the same place. We were working in the same place all at the same time. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. And my wife and I separated in May of 2020, and we were divorced by December of 2020. Very quickly, we both wanted it, which was cool. So it was amicable. But in 2020, I had hired a life coach. And I had a therapist too, but I had a life coach because I wanted to start a coaching business. Because I had taken some coach training at UW-Madison when I was in my position. I had some personal development dollars that I used to learn about coaching. And I was like, I want to do this. I took this coaching training, and Adam, I was like 2 hours into the training, and I'm like, I want to do this the rest of my life. And this was in fall of 2018. And so, yeah, man. So in 2020, I was like, I want to hire a life coach to help me start my life coaching business. She had her own business. And obviously, you can imagine 2020, she was helping me navigate a lot more than just starting a business.
Yeah.
So she helped me in 2020. I took this program, mental fitness training program, through my life coach called Positive Intelligence. Radically changed my life. I was already moving in the direction of healing and loving myself and taking care of myself. But this program helped me understand the power of empathy for yourself. Learning to empathize with yourself in that, for example, I struggled with addiction, and I had an alcoholic father, and my parents always fought, right? Like all the things, I felt shame about belonging to the family that I belonged to, which I didn't realize. I always thought the shame was because of the addictions I had. But through the work, I realized that I've done in my past, it's like, no, man, you had shame before that. The addictions helped you with that shame. And then you had more shame, right? But this program helped me, this mental fitness training program through Positive Intelligence, helped me understand that you can empathize with yourself, and that, like, wow, it's been hard being you. I never, ever thought I could do something like that. Like, to actually look in the mirror, like, it's been hard being Pete Armstrong. And that was a game changer for me, Adam. In addition, I learned about the mind, about how the mind actually works, that there's this inner critic judge construct that's trying to keep you mentally and emotionally and physically safe. But it's every human has it. But for some people, it's really damaging. And for me, it was really damaging because whatever it said to me, you're not worthy, you're not smart, you don't belong. I believed it. I believed it as truth.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 40-year-old white male with a master's degree, I never knew this stuff.
Yeah.
And so when I learned this, and I did more research, obviously, I didn't just take the mental fitness for truth. I did other research on it, and sure enough, this is a thing that is in psychology and in the mind and neuroscience. I went from I'm not worthy to my judge says I'm not worthy. Game changer. When I found out that it's not true, what it says about me, that was like, wow. And so I took that program. In addition, when I turned 40 in 2020, the day after, I started to take alcohol out of my life. I was I would say like, they call it a gray area drinker, where it's not social and you're not like a binge drinker. It's kind of in the middle. And Adam, I started to take alcohol out of my life for 1 year. I called it a sobriety tour. And I called it a tour because I didn't know where I was going. I just knew to take alcohol out of my life for a year and see what happens. And sure enough, man, I took it out of my life in 2020, the day after I turned 40. And 1 year to the day, I left UW-Madison, beautiful position, job, university. and I started my men's coaching business. And largely the why behind it is because I've done a fair amount of research on men's mental health, including understanding that men's loneliness is a real problem. And men need connection, and humans need connection, and men need good relationships. I've been blessed to have amazing friendships in my life. I have not succeeded at romantic relationships, but I've had amazing other mentor type relationships and friendships. So I've never really felt too lonely, but I have felt lonely in my life. But when I read that study, the loneliness study, I call it, and happiness study / happiness study by the Harvard study, it's a study that's been going on for 70 years. I forgot what it's called, but it's been done by Harvard. I was like, I got to help men, because I know so many men that are struggling, with addiction or loneliness. And I'm like, I want to help dads understand how the mind works, that they can start loving themselves, that they don't need alcohol to get through life. They don't need pornography. Like, that these things have just helped you survive, brother. And I didn't understand that until I started doing the work, right? But what I realized is when I took alcohol out, when I took pornography and casual sex out of my life, when I took those things away, it was like, I could see clear. I could see me. Still hard, still got to do the work. But life was much better. Greater self-confidence, greater mental clarity, more energy, better emotional regulation, which means I wasn't as angry and anxious, which allowed me to be a better father. So when I got divorced, one of the primary things I did was improve my relationships with my two older kids, because I had been putting my ex-wife ahead of them. They told me, Dad, you never listen to us. You always listen to Megan. That hurt.
Yeah.
And so we're about 2 years, I'm almost 3 years into my business. I only work with men. I think my clients call me a mental fitness coach. I'm a certified mental fitness coach with positive intelligence. I'm a certified trauma-informed coach through moving the human spirit. I've had a lot of apprenticeship and mentorship under a mindset coach. And through my training in trauma, I've been incorporating a lot of somatic type work into my life because of my trauma. And I'm seeing amazing changes. I'm also helping my clients. They're all dads. My guys are 35 to 50. Most of them are in the professional realm. Some are married, some are divorced. But the core thing they struggle with is relationships.
Yeah.
Often romantic, or they're more angry with their kids than they'd like to be, or they're impatient with their kids, or they can't be present. They're like, I don't even know how to be present. I'm thinking about work all day when I'm home with the kids. And all that, man, is just connected to trauma. It's all connected to us attaching to something inside of us, something external that's going to help us feel safe and worthy. And unfortunately, if we keep chasing that thing, you're never going to get rid of that anxiety, that angst. And so I'm helping men go do the inner work, get to know themselves, work on the things that are in the way of them loving themselves, in the way of understanding. What I think I'm really good at, I haven't said this other than to my clients, this is the first time I'm going to say this, is I'm really good at helping men see what they don't see about themselves.
Yeah.
That's about all I'm good at in life.
No, and oftentimes that's all you need to be good at, right? If you could help somebody see that side of it, like, that's a game changer for folks.
Well, that's what my client said 2 days ago. He's like, dude, that's why I'm working with you. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's because they can't see it themselves. They need somebody to help them out, right?
Yeah, and I need it too. Like, I have an amazing mindset coach. I literally, every time I work with them, I'm like, so I know I rambled a lot, and I can tell within me, like, right, let me connect to my body right now. I can tell right now I'm in an elevated state. Am I sharing too much? Did I not share the right things? What else do I need to share? So I think what I want to do right now, if you don't mind, I don't mind just, would you mind if I just pause and take a couple of breaths?
Yeah. Go for it.
Thank you, man. Thank you, brother.
Of course.
So I threw a lot at you. What do you got?
There's a ton I want to dig into a lot. I am going to start at the pause for a second that you just did. So, just out of my own curiosity, I have a tendency. So you don't know a ton about my background, but I'll give you a quick snippet, just for the purposes of understanding where I'm coming from on this. Prior military guy. Spent about 18 years in the military. Was a dog handler for quite a while. Iraq, Afghanistan, jumping around in and out of helicopters, doing some crazy stuff with a bunch of folks. There isn't much pause in my life. Even after getting out, I had kids. Decided it was time for me to jump ship and get out. Because I was traveling too much. I was always gone. Didn't get to see my kiddos the way I wanted to. So I left before retirement, before any of the stuff. It was time to focus on kids and business. So when I see somebody do what you just did, and that is in that moment of just pausing, like trying to recenter yourself, I tend to take those moments of I'm feeling myself in an elevated state, and okay, that means it's time to put my shoulder down. And I'm not saying one way's right or not. I want to kind of peel from you when you're resetting yourself and you're saying, hey, I just need those moments. What is that for you? What is that doing compared to me? I push that away, and I'm like, no, this elevated state, I need to take this. And I will say that sometimes it has caused me to make incorrect decisions, which is probably one of the reasons why you did what you just did. But I'm not very good at taking those pauses. So walk me through what that was for you.
Situations dictate what state you need to be in. I'm going to make a good guess. So the majority of your time in the military, you are at an elevated state.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, your body felt it had to be. You felt mentally probably you had to be. Either because you were trying to keep yourself alive, or help keep others alive, or some sort of a mission that was related to that. And so your nervous system is saying, hey, listen, we're in fight or flight all the time. And so when I feel this, I got to keep going, right? So situation matters. And that situation, the elevated state, the fight or flight, so to speak, of the sympathetic nervous system, that's what it's designed for. It's designed to keep you going, to keep you safe. Because, right, fight, keep you safe. Flight, keep you safe. That's what it is, right? And so it makes a lot of sense that you still to this day are like, you know what? When I feel that, this is what I do. And I'm even going to push back on you, say, you're not good at it. You're not good at doing what I just did. That's just simply because you haven't practiced.
Mm-hmm.
You had a different thing than me, right? And so what I would say, so that's just that, right? Like, I want to say there are times for that. Like in a bike race, like I race bikes. It's not going to like halfway through, like, I need a pause. You know what I'm saying, brother?
Yeah.
Situations matter. Okay? I'm going to be in a sympathetic state when I'm racing a bike, or even riding a bike, like with my buddies or something. Because like I gotta be on, like I don't want to fall off, or I want to go hard, so I need to get that system ready so I can attack or go up a hill hard. You know what I mean? Before I go into the next part, I just invite you. Is anything you want to comment on that?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's something I'm struggling with currently in a couple different areas where, and I would imagine there's other entrepreneurs in a similar scenario as me, where I thrive very well in chaotic, stressful situations where a decision needs to be made. I'm able to usually analyze what's going on, execute, make a decision, and move forward. Even if I find out later it wasn't the best decision, it was a decision that needed to be made at that moment. So I thrive in those. And when I'm not in a chaotic situation, I don't know oftentimes how to apply myself in a normal, like day-to-day, like, no, this is just normal business as usual. We're not in a chaotic situation. I don't need to execute quickly and move this thing or move that thing. Like, it's business as usual. So I catch myself going, I need to find something to do. Like, I just really am struggling for it all the time. So watching, seeing and understanding the pause that you did. And, you said something too, that the same thing I tell my kids all the time when they say when they're not good at something. Well, how often have you done it? Right? Because if you haven't done it, then you can't be good at it yet. So you got to practice that. So I appreciate you calling me out and telling me the same thing I tell my kids all the time.
Right. I hope you
got to practice.
Right?
No, completely. No, I completely appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you say you're struggling in many areas with this kind of, what I got to do, right? I would say, would you be, can I invite you to be 10% more vulnerable and share where you're struggling?
Sure. Yeah. So we, in my own, the education company that I run, right? So that I help run, I should say. We've had a lot of transition, a lot of change, and I thrived well in that. Like, it was time for me to make decisions, things that needed to get cut, things needed to happen here, things needed to change here. And now we're in like steady state operations. And I kind of stare at my computer and go, I don't have a bad problem I need to fix right now. I don't have something like what, and it puts me in sometimes that freeze mode of like, there's got to be a problem and I'm just not seeing it. And so I'll try to overanalyze, or I won't do some of the things that I know I need to do because I'm looking for a problem that's not there. And so that's a little bit of kind of one situation of where I'm at right now.
Beautiful. So I'll pause you right now. How do you feel about yourself when you solve a bigger problem?
I feel great solving problems. I feel like I'm in that's like my mode of most enjoyment is when I'm fixing something.
If I'm going to ask you this question, what emotion do you have when you solve a problem?
Well, that's a good question.
So think about sad, bad, disgusted, angry, happy, surprised. Those are just the
while I'm solving the problem, I'm usually
or anxiety
in between. I'm usually in between, like, mad and excited. As weird as that is, like, when I'm solving the problem, when I do solve the problem, I feel relieved and happy and excited. Like, I'm like, sweet, what's my next problem? And I think that even the military had me doing that a lot. They'd send me different places to go and fix problems, go do things, and that's just kind of what was in my nature. So, so that's usually I'm on that edge.
So that makes sense. So I want you to be honest with yourself for a second. How does it feel to be like mad and excited kind of at the same time on a regular basis?
Normal.
Love you. Thank you. Normal. Now, are you okay with these lines of questions?
Yeah.
You sure?
Oh yeah, I know I'm not the only one that's going through this. So if somebody else is,
no, man, this is not just entrepreneurs, man. This is the human experience, brother. If there's anything I'm good at, it's like helping men realize, dude, guess what you were before a man? Human.
Yeah.
Human. There isn't no like, oh, this is how men are. Yeah, but you're in a human body. So we need to go at things this way. So if you're interested right now, you can better understand. I guess the gist is this. Your normal. How would you describe your normal? If you were to describe your inner experience right now, maybe take a couple breaths, like a 5-second inhale, maybe like a 6-second exhale. Maybe like do that twice. 2 or 3 times. Use your belly as you're inhaling. And then exhale a little longer. And now I'd love for you to connect and describe a little bit of your inner experience. How would you describe some sort of, if you were to connect to your body and like there's some sort of feeling somewhere or sensation? Where is it and how would you describe it?
I'd say even while I was taking those breaths and I was thinking, I'm still twirling my pen in my hand, I'm still tapping my foot, I'm still like, I can't just let it go. So to me, there's always that little bit of edge.
Yep. So let's do a little more. Let's do one more breathing. 5-second inhale. Let's do one more. And now I want you to connect with that little, your hand, the touch of the pen. Maybe you said something with your leg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bouncing my foot all the time. Yeah.
So if you were to give that attention right now and listen to it, what is it trying to tell you? And you might have to close your eyes even to think and connect to it.
I honestly don't know. Almost discomfort.
Like it's telling you that it's discomfort, like it's uncomfortable. Like you feel uncomfortable, or what do you mean by that?
No, like I've now stopped it, right? So that second breathing session, I stopped it. I consciously stopped it. I said, all right, just let it go. And then after
Right there.
that, it was,
How come
yeah.
you said, whoa, let it go? What was that?
I felt like the only way for me to get what you were trying to get at, or for me to connect with what you were trying to do, was to stop doing that. Like, so I could focus on just the breathing portion to relax myself. So it's got to be like, okay, just stop all other stuff. Just do the breathing, focus on where you're at. So I would say that it's almost uncomfortable to stop doing that. My wife, it drives her nuts because my leg is always going, my hands are always going, I'm always doing something. So I think the discomfort is almost stopping it is uncomfortable.
That makes a lot of sense because that's your normal. That's your homeostasis. That's your default. But if you really did want to better understand it, we could do that here, but I don't think it's probably the right place. But what I would do with you is, and the only reason why we're exploring this is because you're saying, hey man, I'm struggling in a couple areas. That's where I help. I would say that what we would do is I would invite you, and you can even do this without me, but like it's like better with somebody. But what you want to do is you want to lower, you want to change your default state of probably elevated. You're probably, I guarantee, sympathetic dominant. Like you're probably always in sympathetic state. And what the nervous system needs to be calm and be present, right? And to focus on what's in front of us, which the mind likes. But I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but the mind doesn't like multitasking. It likes boom. And I think that's because, in my opinion, like we're designed for attachment, we're designed for connection, we're designed for relationship. And what are some of the most beautiful memories you have? It's usually with another person, right? And so I think that's probably why the mind's like, I don't like let me just be with Adam right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is like if you could calm your emotional state, your nervous system, really connect to that experience you're having inside your body. What I experience with men is they often will tell me once they're in a lower state, that feeling sensation actually has something to share with you. Because the nervous system is all this information.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are using my words right now to communicate. And men don't realize this, but when they say, what is it, 20-80? 80% is nonverbal, 20% is verbal. Think about that. If you want to be the man you desire to be, you need to understand your nonverbal information and communication. If you want, and I'm not just saying you, Adam, I'm not pointing the finger, I'm saying for us, men, we need to better understand what our nervous system's trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, I kind of say this like, you, not only that, but you have this whole other side of the mind, the emotional side, right? You're probably killer with a rational, logical, and like, boom,
Yes.
boom, 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 execute. Right? I mean, I don't want to do that from a machine gun standpoint. I'm just saying from a task piece. Make that clear. But like, and we want to solve problems. We want to feel good about ourselves. But there's this whole other side of the mind where the real magic happens. Connection, right? And presence and love, curiosity, empathy, compassion. All the things that really offer the most value to the human experience, including dads, including entrepreneurs. Remember, you're an entrepreneur. It wasn't just to make money. You had something that you cared about. And if I were to guess, it had something to do with love. You and your co-owners created something. Obviously, you want to make money. But at the end of the day, there was something there at the kernel. It was rooted in some sort of emotion that you want your client to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's on the other side of the mind. But then we get so dominant on this other side. And I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. But the point of that is that if you can slow down in the moments where you feel like you can't be present, like you have to be solving something else, or you're looking for something external to solve, you just slow down with yourself and listen to yourself, because there might be something else. In addition, this is in addition, like separate. If you are in a sympathetic dominant state, it's going to make a lot of sense that you continually have those thoughts and beliefs because you're in that state. Now that you're in that state, your mind's like, okay, let's go. And your body's like, okay, let's go. What do we got? So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I, it's funny because I know there's a lot of other guys that I've talked to that are very similar in this conversation as me, right? And always wanting, and obviously you've seen it, hence it's something that you're able to kind of label very well. And it's, for me, it's extremely difficult. I'm very much like logical, rational. This just makes sense. This is what we have to do because this is what the numbers tell me to do. And almost no emotion is involved in anything that I do other than with my family. Those are the only people that can catch my emotion, right? So my kids, my wife. So it's, I've got to figure that out a little bit more with the business side of the house too, because I know the emotional state is something that is going to, I think, open up my ability to do even more inside of my company than I'm doing now. So
and
I appreciate
at home.
that. Yeah.
I know
you're not wrong.
I know. You know why? Because you just told me. You just told me you just told me all about your nervous system. You just told me all about Adam. And so I even though you say, right, like I know that if you're largely dominant on a sympathetic nervous system, which I am too, we literally have to be very intentional in lowering our nervous system through breath work, meditation, exercise, praying, connection with people that love us, because that actually helps us access that emotional state that we desire to be in and provide as a father and husband. Like I mean this, I don't mean this like just for you, I'm telling you, like this is what I help men with. It's like, hey, listen, if you fly off the handle at home, or if your wife says you're not empathetic, or you just don't understand who you are, Or, you know what, I just don't have any emotional bottom. There's always logical and rational. I say, it makes sense, but guess what? You can't solve an emotional problem with rational thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And guys are like, wait, what? Hold on, yes, we can.
I can always figure out a way. Don't get me wrong.
Try.
I think about when you say that, I think about it as that like with something with my wife, right? Because like my wife will say something that's usually emotion based, where mine is usually logic based, and I'll hear it, and I'm like, oh no, the logical thing to do in this situation is X, Y, and Z. And it's, but to your point, that's not how to fix the emotional. The emotional needs to be connected to in an emotional way to be able to really, you know, break through what the actual problem is. Because it's, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen, it's old at this point, but there's a video of a woman talking about this pain in her head, and it's got the nail sticking out of her forehead. Have you seen that? It's not about the nail, right? And it's like, no, really, like the logical part of my brain says, no, I just yanked this nail out, and you're not like, it's going to be okay, like it's going to be fine, you know. And it's such a, it's just the way my brain works.
Actually, you might have been one of the guys that I recommended. I'm just going to open my door. I'm still going to talk to you. I had one of the guys I think I recommended that you interview. He sent that to me when he went through one of my trainings, and he was like, so you're telling me that empathy, we were talking about empathy or compassion or something, like, you're telling me this is an emotional problem or something. I forgot how he worded it, and I just laughed so hard knowing him. It was like, I was like, let's talk about this next week. But one thing I wanted to say, Adam, and before I went down that rabbit hole of kind of like the nervous system, and obviously I'm going to be very clear for all those listening on the call and to you, Adam. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't have a PhD in, you know, neuroscience and trauma and the nervous system, so I'm giving very broad strokes here, and best guesses. So I'll make that very clear. But what I was going to say earlier is, like, if we often want humans some sort of reward, right? And we want to feel good, right? The dopamine type stuff. We especially want it if we're in a state that doesn't feel good. And whether you know it or not, your normal is your normal. No judgment here. But the body really isn't designed to always be on. And so sometimes when you get that, yay, haha, it feels good, so you're going to be chasing that. You're going to chase it because it's better than being in the state that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I want to let you know that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I appreciate you telling me I'm not normal. I mean, no, it's, and I know that. Yeah, true. There's no such thing as normal. That's funny.
Yeah.
So I want to, I first off really appreciate that. It was definitely something I've never done on this podcast before, kind of going in that realm. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I want to now rewind the clock to figure out how you got from being where you were to now being able to have this conversation here, breaking it down, you know, quickly with a guy you just met. Like how you said you grew up with, you were always out playing sports, doing stuff, selling drugs, doing drugs. You mentioned having an alcoholic father, right? How did you go from that portion of your life? Let's just rewind. Tell me what it was like for you growing up, like in a little bit more detail about your dad, what it was like having your dad around as your father figure, maybe even your dad's dad, if you know much about him.
Yeah, thanks, brother. So the conundrum of my dad is that my dad, I can remember my dad's anger. So anger, you know, now that I've learned, you know, anger is okay. It's aggression that's not good. My dad was aggressive when he got angry, and I have a couple memories, as a matter of fact, that were, now that I've done the work, Adam, were pretty foundational to how I saw the world and how I saw myself in the world and how I saw myself in the family that I belonged to, which then how I saw myself. My dad, I can remember him getting arguments with my neighbors. Like literal screaming matches with neighbors. For like us running in their yard, and then like the guy, the neighbor father would come over and say, hey, don't really want the kids doing this or that, and he would just attack them. And man, I remember that was so embarrassing. I just like, I remember as a kid, Adam, like I had this like, and then like we couldn't go in that neighbor's yard.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened with multiple neighbors. I couldn't go in neighbors' yards. I couldn't go into some neighbors' houses. And I wasn't like the worst troublemaker, but I was a little bit of a troublemaker. Makes sense, right? My dad was an alcoholic, and he was angry, and the relationship with my mom and him was not good. I remember him yelling at her often. I want to say I remember physical abuse with her, but I don't fully remember that. I do remember physical abuse with me on several times. But if anything, being around him, I was nervous, like he was going to hurt me. And then there was this other side of him, Adam, that was like I knew he loved me. It was clear. So it's kind of interesting dichotomy. But I also didn't get a lot of time with him. Like I was in Little League, and I think he took me a couple of my practices and stuff of that nature. But, my dad, I don't think I got a lot of time with him. And I also didn't get a lot of time with my mom. I think that's what led me to coping unhealthily with like pornography and magazines. And then eventually my middle teens, turning to drugs. My dad also smoked pot. I think I think I found my dad's weed 12 or 13. And me and my brother, who was like 2 years younger than me, we went in the garage and smoked it and tried it. And so there was just a lot of like, I mean, even talk about it now. I connect to my body right now. In my body, I feel like a little tense, little tightness. And it's like, because in some way, shape, or form, I just almost remember what it was like being there, 30 years ago, 43. And it's like, man, it was just kind of chaotic and not knowing. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like I didn't have to do my homework. I barely went to school. How the hell I got away with it? I don't know with you. And I remember something my dad told me. He said, I don't care if you do drugs, just make sure you do it with me. Like, I don't want you to do drugs. Try it with me first. And he said, you need to learn how to balance a checkbook. That's what's important in life. Honestly. And so in hindsight, one of the things I struggle with, Adam, majority of my life, up until probably about 3 years ago, and I still, in the last 3 years, it's just dissipated and not been as concentrated. It's not belonging. I never felt like I belonged, man. And listen, man, I didn't know why I didn't feel that until I got some really good mindset coaching and therapy. Actually, mindset coaching, not even therapists, to be perfectly frank. Inner child type work, that I realized that, the first time I felt like I didn't belong was when someone in childhood, I didn't know this is a subconscious, brother. I couldn't go in someone's yard. I couldn't go in someone's house. And I remember that feeling. At the time, I was a child. I didn't know, I don't belong. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you're just like, oh man, this kind of sucks being me. We don't fully internalize and understand it. But that happened, that pain, that carried that wound for a long time. And even like with other friendships, like I always had like all these cool friendships, like different groups of people. And I belonged to so many different groups, but it's almost at the same time like I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere.
Yeah.
And dude, that manifests in ways of, that's pain. That's wounds, man. There's nothing more than the human wants than to be accepted. That is hardwired into the human existence. And that's something also I try to help men understand. Like, hey, listen, you may not understand, but you've been rejected. You've been abandoned. And those wounds, man, they're still showing up in today. You know how they're showing up, I know? Because, right, you get angry about this. You have anxiety about that, right? And it's like, thankfully, I've done the work to heal the majority of that. But that's what it was like being me. It was like, I felt like I didn't belong. My dad was an alcoholic. My dad was angry. My parents got divorced. I think I was about 14 or 15. I was the oldest sibling. I had a brother and a sister. My brother was in the middle. My sister was the youngest. I remember my parents was a volatile night. I can remember the last night my dad was in the house. I think he went to jail. And then it was tough, man. And my dad's dad, to get to deeper, that's the question and answer that is, my dad's dad was, my dad was an alcoholic. My grandpa was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
They're Irish. I'm putting stereotypes there, but they were Irish. I can just remember my grandma and grandpa of my dad's mom and dad. I mean, honestly, I remember Pall Mall and Pabst Blue Ribbon. And it's like, I'm laughing about it now.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about them. And it's like, right now, 30 years later, we know the consequences of smoking and alcohol. It's like on family dynamics and on our own personal health. And it's like, damn, man, my dad had it rough. 2 alcoholic parents, 4 kids, including my dad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no wonder why my dad was the way he was, and he worked for the Wisconsin Gas Company the majority of his life, his adult life, and he went to work every day. He didn't miss work, but his job only took him. He did it in 4 or 5 hours instead of 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Guess where he went after 4 or 5 hours?
To the bar.
Yep. Every day.
Yeah.
Right? And in hindsight, you say, well, my dad's an alcoholic, my dad's, right? We label people, right? But the work that I do and understand, taking a trauma lens, my dad was struggling with something.
Yeah.
Struggling, man. People don't become addicted to something because, that's just cool. That's just, I have no choice. People become addicted to something because it helps them with some sort of pain. And it becomes a problem then. But the addiction is not the problem. The problem is a deep inner core wound that people don't know how to fully handle. And so what do? They reach for something external to help them feel better about themselves. It numbs the pain, or it helps them avoid even thinking about it, right? And who doesn't want to be out of pain? And so in hindsight, it's like, what was my dad struggling with? You know what I mean? Like, so now I've accepted him, I've forgiven him, I have empathy for him. And wow, has that been healing in my journey?
Yeah.
And that's something I tell man, like I'll tell any man, like, your father or mother wounds. Listen, man, if you haven't tended to those, you don't even know what the hell I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Look into it, because if your relationship isn't the way you want it to be with your wife or partner, or you've been divorced like me a couple times, I guarantee it has to do with childhood. And that's the angle that I look at things now. Is I want to help men do the deep work, because the outcome of doing that deeper work is better relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we all want, Adam, right? Like, I want a better relationship with my kids. I want my kids to trust me and love me and know that they're loved and know that they can do anything they set their mind to. But when we're struggling ourselves, that's in the way of us helping our kids be who that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, I look at it as like, it's not selfish. Like, dude, bro, you need to take care of yourself. You need to work on the things that are in your way so you can become the man that you desire to be. And if you don't work on the things that are in your way, and you keep like running into the same freaking problems, you're not broken. You're not unworthy because of that. I mean, if you broke your arm, Adam, what are you going to go do? You're going to go to the doctor, right? And get it so you can get it fixed and it can heal. It's the same thing. It's just an emotional. It's not your fault, even though we blame ourselves, but it's not. So I'll stop right there. That's just a little bit of like, what it was like being me as a child, and then like how I now see how it impacted my struggles. And then now another side of it almost. I'm going to say I'm on the other side of it. The other side is not, I'm not done, forever journey, but I'm on this other side. Curious, open, accepting, understanding, grieving.
Yeah.
Right? Like we all wish we had a father that was like, not like that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love that everything you were just talking about. That's one of the reasons I ask that exact question every time, is because if you have not kind of dealt with some of that in your head, because we all have something going on from when we were kids, whether we thought our dad should have been doing something that he wasn't, or that they're doing too much of something that they shouldn't be, or we have some story in our brain about why our dads were doing something they were, and until you actually kind of analyzed exactly what you were saying, like what was my dad, why was my dad doing what he was doing, why were my parents doing what they were doing, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, they didn't love me or whatever. 9 times out of 10, it's likely not that they didn't love you. It's that they didn't know how to deal with what they were dealing with either, right? I mean, no, there's very few people out there that don't love their kids. They just don't know how to do the loving. They don't know how to express it. They don't know. Maybe it wasn't an example for them. Like they didn't know. They had no idea. Like they were still coping with something. So, and that's something that I strongly encourage everybody to do. And that's why I love asking that question. And I really appreciate everything you just said on that, Pete. It was
great question. Thank you for asking. I encourage you to continue to ask it. I love it. It's
and I'm hoping that when I ask it, people that are listening are asking them same thing. Like, okay, what was it like with me and my dad? Like, pause the show. Take a step back, listen to what you just, like, remember what you just heard, like, think about your own dad, think about your own, like, upbringing, like, what is it that I felt like I was missing from my dad? Was it that I felt like I'm, how is it that I'm showing up as a dad right now because I haven't dealt with some of the stuff from my parents? How is it that I'm showing up right now as a husband because I haven't dealt with some of that stuff and haven't thought through some of that stuff? Like, to me, it's extremely important. And that's, once I really started to understand who my dad was, that helped me a ton to realize why I was doing some of the things I was doing, or why I held on to some anger for my dad for no reason. Like there was zero reason to hold on to anger for my dad or be upset about some of the things. It was like the man was missing an entire, tool chest of tools to use as a dad because he was never given that as a kid, So it's
you know what though, Adam? So this is another thing, a little, because I love you and want to challenge you, is like, listen, man, our emotions are our emotions. You can't say like there was no reason for it. There actually was a reason. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had it.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, like, if you were angry with your dad, and I'm sure it sounds like you've already done the work. I'm not trying to sit here and coach you right now, but there's always a reason for an emotion, because an emotion is connected to a belief. So if the belief is X, that belief influences the emotion. The emotion influences an action, like a behavior. The behavior then kind of is your life, the result.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like this lineage. They all influence each other. So almost every emotion, it's actually, there is a purpose. There is a purpose, actually. It's trying to communicate something to you, often through the body. So, like, and I mean, maybe you know this, but part of grieving. I'm not a grief expert at all. I haven't messed with that at all. But part of grieving, what I do understand, is anger.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, like, if little Adam was grieving the father that he wished he had, or like. Anger could have been a reason. That could have been purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
There could have been something there. Anger is, it doesn't matter, like, they have shame about being angry. There's 2 things about shame, about anger. One is oftentimes, it's, I'm sure you heard this, like, it's a secondary emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard this?
Yep.
Often men are afraid. They don't know it, but they fear something. They're afraid of their, speak from my lived experience. My 18-year-old daughter, I have had the hardest time raising her over my other two children. She triggers me. Almost all my anger is rooted actually in fear. It comes out as anger. It comes out as anger. But really, if I were to slow down, which I have been able to do more in the last, let's just say, 6 months, year, I can express, I'm afraid that if you continue to do this, this is what's going to happen. That feels a lot better than WTF, you're not doing this. Go do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's my default. Pete's normal, Adam,
Mm-hmm.
is the latter, is the anger. Control. I'm trying to control for a future pain. I don't want that future pain to happen. It could be like her not getting a job, her hurting herself, her becoming an alcoholic, right? I'm trying to control for, I don't want to feel that way in the future. So the mind's like, oh, if you don't want that to happen, this is what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other options. And often those other options come, we talked about sometimes when you're in that state of like head down, shoulder down, you make decisions, which is cool. You can do that, you can execute, but often you're like, shoot, I made the wrong decision. And then you pay for that consequence later. If we can slow down in these types of situations with parenting, relationships, we can be more vulnerable, tap into how we really feel. I'm like, how are you feeling? Like, no, genuine, man. If you're afraid of this, that is how you feel. You can't just be like, oh, you're a P word, ends with Y. Like, right? Like, I don't think people really say that as much, or at least not in Madison anymore. But you can just substitute that any word. Like, you're weak, you're whatever, right? Like, because you're afraid. You have to honor that in yourself and accept that if you really want to be authentic. An authentic person is going to be like, I am afraid about that. Rationally, I understand I don't need to be, but emotionally, I am afraid.
Yeah. Which makes sense, because most of the time, if I ever get angry or yell at my kids, which is rather rare, but it's usually because they did something that I fear is going to turn into something much worse later on. Like, if I don't correct it right now, this is going to turn into a big problem later,
100%.
And, like, that seems to be, it's going to be terrible. If I don't stop you right now from climbing up the furniture and onto the ceiling, what's going to happen is later on in life, you're going to be the largest terrorist in the world that everybody's going to hate. It's like, no, you idiot. Like, what in the world? That's not how this goes, Like, we're going to be in the middle of a really nice restaurant. You're going to be hanging from the chandelier. No, that is not actually what's going to happen.
That would actually be an epic story when they're like 20, though.
Valid. It would be. Yes.
At the wedding, remember this one time you were at a restaurant and you were swinging from the chandelier. Which, all kidding aside, look at what we're doing right now. What are we doing?
Laughing, joking, telling stories.
We're laughing. Because guess what? It literally would be funny as... It would be funny as hell if our kid did that, but because we fear judgment.
Yeah.
Now it's not funny. Now it's fear.
No longer funny.
But if you were like... if you were to see some other kkid... I feel like you're at a restaurant now. You and I are at a restaurant.
I'd be telling that story like crazy.
And we see some other kid... like doing something. I bet you and I, we probably start laughing.
Oh yeah, I would have to go to the bathroom to laugh really, really hard. Yes,
you're like, oh my god, this is so epic. How the hell did he get there?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's valid.
Sidebar.
Extremely valid.
Sidebar.
One thing that you mentioned earlier that I really want to hit on, because I think that it is a very large, prolific problem, especially right now, is the pornography side of the house, for men especially. And I mean, if you look at, I think the average age of a child seeing pornography now is like 8 or 9 years old. It's insanely early. And I think this is beyond just Adam's opinion, but Adam's opinion here, pornography has a devastating effect on people as a whole. It's not every addiction does. That's the problem with addiction, right? Is it can have a devastating effect regardless of what you're addicted to. And there are a lot of downstream effects on all addictions, but pornography is one that society as a whole seems to think is quite okay. That, oh no, this is just normal expression of X, Y, or Z. But I'm curious just to get your take on, like, you realized you had, I think it was, if you said 2014, I think you said, is when you kind of started to realize that needed to change, and that was the last time. So yeah, you're coming up on 10 years, that's right. So how did you realize that was a problem? And was it because it was a problem for you, or is it because it's a problem regardless, or how did that come about?
Yeah. Well, great question. I love talking about this because I help a lot of men with this. As a matter of fact, I see a lot of men come to me, not a lot. I would say several of my clients struggle with this. And it is their primary addiction and primary struggle. What I started realizing as I started after therapy for a little while, like in 2014, as I started getting language to describe how I felt, Adam, including shame. Like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, right, we hear ashamed of, but shame, when I started learning about shame, when I described how I felt to my therapist, and then I told him how I felt, and I told him when I experienced it, he got just very curious. Well, what were you doing before that? And sure enough, I'd be like, looking at pornography, or trying to have sex with a woman that I didn't see a future with. Like, we were just mutual, what's the word? Consensual. But it was just like, it was off, man. Like, I just knew I'm just with this woman to, like, have sex with her. Mm-hmm. It got to a point where it's like, that just doesn't feel right. Like, genuinely, I'm using feelings. Like, it didn't feel right within my body. And there just came a point where I was like, I don't want to feel that anymore. Like, when I'm in shame, I hide. And if you think about, and this has nothing to do with all the listeners who are not Christian. I'm Christian. But think about the story of Adam and Eve, right? They felt naked and afraid and ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do? They hid.
Yeah, they hid.
They went and hid. Yeah. And they covered, exactly, beautiful. They covered themselves, right? We don't know what the story really meant, but at the end of the day, they covered themselves. They hid. They isolated because they felt shame. I heard this beautiful description of what shame is, and this guy's a Christian therapist. I forgot his name. He writes books and everything. But he said shame is what happens to us when we turn away from God. We are now disconnected from God, and we feel unworthy of love. Well, this is all like subconscious. We don't know that. Oh, I feel unworthy of love. That's not what I'm saying. But the reason why we feel so bad in shame is because our body and our minds are saying we're not worthy of love. We're not, and what that means is that we are not worthy of connection. And again, we're human, Adam. Even men. You yearn for a deeply intimate relationship. You cannot get around that. It is within us. And that is why, being ostracized from a group millions of years ago, they have shame. Because what does it feel like when you're ashamed? It feels like death. Why? Because you literally could die if you were solo. Not only because you don't have support from the community, but also, we just talked about in the beginning of this. One of the reasons I started my business was loneliness. And shame is basically like loneliness. You feel so lonely. And Adam, I can remember feeling that shame, and it perpetuated my feelings of not belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it confirmed it. Like I was a single dad. I can remember like I was a single dad raising these 2 little kids, beautiful children. We lived in Shorewood, Wisconsin, which is a pretty nice neighborhood. It's a high upper middle class. We lived in an apartment, and all the other people were, you know, married. I was only single dad, and all the kids were friends with all these people who were making money. And here I am, and as a single parent, you know, returning adult student, making no money
Mm-hmm.
and struggling with shame and addiction, pornography. And that just made it worse. Going to parties, like I just felt like I couldn't be myself. So here's a great way to know when you're in shame. And men are in shame, they don't even know they're in shame. If you go somewhere and you feel like you can't be yourself, you're afraid to be yourself, or you don't feel like talking to anybody, that isn't just because you're introverted. That is often something deeper is going on there.
Mm-hmm.
You fear rejection. You fear that people won't like you. If someone won't like you, at the core is that we take that as like a little bit of a rejection. Like, oh, I'm not good enough for that person. Now, don't get me wrong. Once you're healed and if you're in a secure attachment, if you're in a secure place as a man, as a person, a lot of people don't experience that as much. Like I don't experience it as much as I used to. We're talking even a couple of years ago. It would be hard. And so the pornography piece is this. The reason why I quit, and I knew I had to do something about it, was because I had shame. And shame, like a healthy shame, is saying, hey, man, that isn't good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think God gave that to us. Like, hey, listen, again, like, right, my spiritual beliefs, even if you don't believe in God, like, just for a second, like, shame is like this thing, like, hey, that's not good. A healthy shame is like, that is not good. Like, you should not hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Because in many ways, pornography is hurting.
Yeah.
You know, it's hurting the women that are in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yes, they chose to go into it, so to speak. But it's hurting. It's hurting. And so that's how I got out of it, because I knew I was just like, I had so much shame about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm in grad school. You got one of the little kids?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay. I can make sure not to use that any words. Is that good?
I got headphones in.
Oh, cool. That's right.
You say hi. Boy, you smell like you were in the pool. Yeah. Yep. You stink.
He's tired too.
Yeah, you look.
He wants some connection. Look at him.
You need to go nap, huh?
Yeah, that's good.
Love you, dude.
You too, Daddy.
Look at that. Yeah, man. Look at that. This is good. He just wants some love, man. This is what he wants. This is what it's about right here, man. He wants connection.
That's right. Oh, here comes the other little man. You gonna come over too, buddy? Come over to the other knee, dude. Oh, and my little lady. All 3 of them showed up in here. Goodness gracious. Diana. She just ran away. The whole crew showing up here.
That's awesome, man. Oh,
There
look
we
at
go.
her. Is that your daughter, the little one?
Yeah.
Say hi.
Hi, guys.
You're
Oh,
on
they can't hear me.
TV.
That's right.
He said, hi, guys.
Hi.
She just staring at herself.
She's like, who
Wait
is
a
that?
minute.
Oh, look at that love.
Mm-hmm.
They love her little
Yeah.
sister, don't they?
Very much. They love their little sister.
Yeah, that's cute.
Take your eyes off you.
All right. All right, Daddy's going to finish this conversation, okay, boys? Love you guys.
Bye,
Here
guys.
with me, little lady. He said,
Can you tell him I said thank you for coming?
he said, thank you for coming. Love you, boys. Love you, little lady. Crazy kiddos.
Yeah, man. Hey, That was beautiful.
Thank you. Much agreed. It's one of the best parts about working from home. It's also one of the worst parts because, man, oh man, can that be distracting in the middle of the day to see those 3 little kids. It's like, I don't want to work now. I want to go play. So
Yeah. Yeah. But you notice what's your son, the oldest son's name?
Adam.
Yeah, man. So little Adam, man, your oldest, dude. You see just how he just came in there, and he just wanted, honestly, that's all they needed was that little bit. That's all he needed. He needed some connection. He needed some love from you. And you not only were willing to give it, but you received that. He needed it. You just knew it, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's just beautiful, man. Proud of you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Serious. I really am serious, man. I love how you allowed them to. This is actually really important, man. Try to get this right. If you were to empathize with your oldest who came in first, and think about himself, be him for a second. He opened the door. You think about why he came in. He wanted connection. He wanted love. He wanted to see his daddy. You allowed him in. You welcomed him with open arms. He felt accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Once he felt accepted, the other kids came in and felt accepted. You didn't have to respond that way. As a matter of fact, you could have been like, hey, I'm in a podcast right now. You need to get away. And you might have said it in a nice, discerning way and not in a bad way. But your son was needing love. And what you told him was, hey, you didn't know it, right? You didn't think about it. A lot of men are disconnected from this, but you're not. At least in this moment, is that this little boy needed love. That's all he wanted, man. And you welcomed him and loved him and connected with him. That's beauty. But what could happen is when those moments happen where he just needs love right now, and we don't know it, men don't know it, and he opens the door and you said something along the lines of, hey, dude, you need to get away. I'm in this podcast. Mm-hmm. I'll be with you in a little bit. He takes that. Most children take that as, I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is they end up developing that when they feel that way, not just from one instance, obviously, Adam, but then they start taking and internalize that. And they're like, that's how certain attachment, avoidant attachment, other things like, oh, I feel this way. I don't get my needs met.
Yeah.
And I know it seems like I'm going on a little tangent here and something deeper, but I want all men listening to this to know that when your child's coming to you, doesn't matter if they're freaking 15 years old or they're 1 year old, and they're coming to you and they want hugs and kisses or love, man, please try to give it to them. Because there's nothing more important than those moments.
Yeah.
And so this really isn't just for you, Adam. This is for anyone listening, any brother listening, that this is a beautiful moment right here. This right here is all the little micro decisions that a man has to make to teach children what love is. Mm-hmm. That when they feel that discomfort, that aching, that yearning, that loneliness, and they get it from our parents, I want to get this from my daddy, that you welcome them in, you're teaching them how to love. And so, good on you, man. That was beautiful. I'm really proud of you. I'm happy for your kids and your wife. And I want men to see this, I'm not making, this is really important, these little moments. And so I hope men listening realize that do what Adam does.
Yeah. I'll say that, first off, I appreciate it. It is, to me, it's extremely important. And it's one of those, I didn't realize it. I realized it while I was in the military that I was missing out on a lot of it, which is one of the reasons I left. And then it was like, now I need to know, no matter what, that I can be right there by their side if they need it. Because I don't want to be on the other side of the world doing some other crazy thing, doing like missing out on some other adventure, missing out on some hug that was supposed to be there, or for them to feel like they're missing out on some hug that was supposed to be there. And it's sometimes, and this is the wrong way to say it, but I'm going to say it because I don't know how else to say it. But sometimes I feel like I can go a little bit too far with it, in so much that it takes away from my ability to get the job done from time to time. But at the same point, it's like it doesn't matter necessarily if I build a bajillion-dollar company if my kids don't love me or they don't have a connection with me. So I might as well have that connection with them, because that's going to last way longer than any business that I build or anything that I'm doing for some client or for some whatever. So to me, and I'm hoping again for everybody that's listening, it's not that I have it all figured out by any means. In this particular scenario, it worked out really well that, I was in a great headspace, which I usually am recording these podcasts, that they were ready to come in and just kind of say hello. It's remembering to do that in those hard moments when your brain is not fully ready for that. That is there again. It's probably fear based. Like when we shove the kid back out the door, is what is somebody else that's watching this going to think? Or what if I don't get this email finalized before, or whatever is going on, that we decide to get angry and push our kids out the door. And it always goes back to me that one. There's that one video. I wish I could remember what it was, but I think it was on CNN or something like that, where a guy was being interviewed, and then the kid comes in the back in the office, and then he's like freaking out and getting angry, and then the nanny comes in and is like pulling the child out, and he's like getting really upset. He ends up, I guess, later firing the nanny and all this stuff, and it's like, dude, like, he was fearful that he was going to look bad on national television because a kid walked in the background, instead of going, guess what? I'm doing an interview from home. This is part of what's going on, and I'm a dad. So guess what's going to happen? Is kids are going to show up sometimes, and it is what it is, And I never want that to be the case. So anybody listening, I'm hoping, can kind of feel that same thing. Like, a deal doesn't get ended because a child walks into the room or whatever. There was one podcast I was listening to once. It was a mom. She was a single mom, and she had. I think what she called it was like a mother's assistant or something like that. But she brought her kids everywhere. She was an apartment investor, and I wish I could remember her name. It was years ago that I listened to this. But she walked into a broker's office to talk about an apartment building that she was planning to buy, and had the kids, and the kids were playing with something on the floor, and the dad or the broker was like kindly saying, "Do you want to come back when the kids aren't with you?" type of thing. And she was like, "Oh, well, the kids are always with me because this is what I am. I'm a mom. I'm a mom first, and the kids are always going to be here. So if that doesn't work with you, then I'll find a broker that it does work for, and I don't have an issue with that. I completely understand what you're saying." And so in that moment, those kids realized, "Boy, I'm super important. My mom does not care," and it also sets some standards. Like, this is what it is. Like, it's okay. And if that's not okay with you, that's fine. I'll do business with somebody else. Like, you're gonna find plenty of people that won't bring their kids into the office, and I can respect that. But for me, that my kids are always going to be there. Like, there's no. There's no way around it. So
Awesome. Yeah, and it's hard to do that, but at the end of the day, I think what I want to capitalize on before we kind of get back to maybe talking about the pornography stuff is that you said something beautiful. You said, like, when I'm not in the right mindset, right, and I'm operating from a place of scarcity or lack or fear.
Mm-hmm.
You hit the nail on the head in that, and this is fairly replete in mindfulness and neuroscience and positive psychology, trauma, all the things that I'm really interested in teaching men about and learning about and coaching on. But, like, you are more likely to react in a more unaccepting, protective way, because what you're doing, you could have been like, "Hey, not right now, guys. No. That's actually, I would almost say, it's not bad. You're not doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Get curious. What I would say is, well, if you did that, what was happening actually is that Adam was protecting himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a belief, right? There's a stored belief, maybe some past experience, that you fear in some way, shape, or form, that because if that happens, Pete, the people listening to the podcast, right? They're going to reject me because my kid's interrupted. I'm not a good podcast host. I'm not a good business owner. That means less money, right? You connect all the dots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, Adam, we need to take care of ourselves. Because we need to reduce the amount of times that we are in those states. We're never going to get it 100%. We're not Jesus. We're not Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you want to try to be your best self? And so let's just try to be our best selves and learn how to minimize those opportunities. In order to minimize opportunities that you react in fear, gotta be doing the healing work. We gotta get a coach. We gotta get therapists. We gotta regulate our nervous systems. We need to get exercise. We need to get good, high quality sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We need to connect with the ones we love. I know it sounds like a lot, but if I were to give one thing to do is for people to do, men and dads, is get quality sleep, and your life will change. It will reduce your nervous system's fight or flight mechanism, which is usually driven by fear. And if you're not in fear, now you can love. You can do what you just did.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I always try to tell men, I'm like, hey, listen, you're never going to get perfect, right? But I always try to say, let's get to a place where you can love more and fear less. Let's just let's move it, right? And this is an example of you loving more. And that's what I love to help men do is, hey, let's just love more.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we love, man, like, there is no fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do want to go back to, in the short time we have left, the pornography side, because that's where we were at before. We were lovingly interrupted by my kiddos. But yeah, let me turn it back over to you on where you were.
Yeah, I think the gist is that the vast majority of men who use pornography, everyone uses it differently, or sex chats, or has sex with casual sex, or has affairs, or whatever it is. It's a way to help you feel better about yourself. Step a hug. You're not doing it because you're a bad dude. You're getting something from it. And my lived experience, when I realized that they're doing the work and getting curious about my addiction, I was lonely. Even as a little boy. Right? My dad wasn't around as much. My mom didn't give me the emotional affection that I needed. So guess what? If I was alone and lonely are two different things. Like, I'm right now alone in my office, right? I'm not lonely though. Like, I feel connected with you. I feel connected to the topic we're talking about. But I felt lonely. And in some way, shape, or form, pornography helped me feel less lonely. I know it sounds twisted. Exactly, for a moment. Exactly. Beautiful point. All addictions are short-term solutions to long-term problems that just become problems. You try to turn it off. You try to quit. You can't. That's addiction. If it's something you're doing that you know is it's kind of helping, but it's causing long-term problems, and you can't stop, or you tried to stop and you just haven't succeeded the way in which you would like.
Mm-hmm.
It's an addiction, and you need help. And so that's it. Like, the pornography is it's a way to feel better, but it causes problems because that's not how we're designed. We're designed to have intimacy with another person. Like, sex is just. I read this great book called To Be a Man. I forgot his name. I think the book's at my house, not my office. But it's called To Be a Man. And he talks about outgrowing pornography. He also talks about, like, sexual intimacy. The best sexual intimacy comes after relational intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of men want sex because they think it just feels good. The physical feeling does feel good, but often men, when a woman says, "Hey, I'm willing to have sex with you," what does that really tell the man? It tells them,
I'm wanted, or
"I'm wanted."
yeah.
Honestly, man, it's driven within a man, hardwired to be desired and wanted. We want to know we want to be wanted. It's crazy, but we do. And so, if men aren't getting sex, that causes all types of emotional issues for them. Oftentimes a man can not be getting sexual intimacy from their partner, so they lean on pornography, and then they just end up choosing that because it's easier.
Mm-hmm.
Or you write that there's this beautiful song. I found out this guy. His name's Griffin House. And the song is, I think it's called "Gotta Go Through It" or "Go Through It." And the first couple lines of the song say, "You can't go around what you must go through." Right? And if you're struggling to have sex with your wife, this has nothing to do with sexual intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of it. But really, there's a relational disconnection here. And the relational disconnection, you got to do your part. You can get marriage counseling too. Obviously, that's one option. But really, at the end of the day, if you're struggling there, there's a relational issue. And to do your part would be to get your own help with what's going on. And that doesn't even mean if you're like not using pornography, if you're just not having sex with your wife, that's just a red flag. There's a relational disconnection. That's it. Sex, it's like a byproduct. If you're connected relationally, right, sex is just like a symptom that things are going well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a little off of pornography, but pornography does indeed, I can't speak to this eloquently, but it's not good for the mind. One way to think about it is pornography helps you release dopamine because of the chasing of it and then finally releasing. But the one way that I like to think about this is that I learned this through Andrew Huberman on one of his podcasts, was that don't chase no effort or low effort dopamine.
Mm.
The dopamine you want should come as a reward from some sort of effort.
Yeah.
Right? So like, I worked out today. It was freaking hard. I had a dopamine release, right? Or like working through a marriage, working through a conflict, and then, right? Like, isn't like some of the best sex like after you have like a conflict? Because it's like, man, we worked through that. We worked through that. I now feel connected. Now we can do this, right? I'm trying not to use certain language just because you said family oriented. But but I'm going to say this as a blanket statement. There are very few situations where pornography is beneficial for someone's life. Very few situations.
No,
and I would say it and I would say this, what are the consequences of you using it? So get curious about it. When I use it, how do I feel? Do I feel less confident? Do I feel more confident? Do I not do what I say I'm going to do? Because like if you have shame about it, when you have shame, you're less motivated, you're less confident, right? You're not believing in yourself. And I know all this because I've been there. When I stopped using, and it's just like, whoa, man, I believe in you, Peter. I believe in you, Pete. And so it's just, unfortunately, it's a lot more accessible nowadays, and it's a lot more, as you said, it's a lot more it's accessible and accepted. But man, and this is another thing for dads, have the conversation with your kids. Have the conversation with your boys. You gotta. I told my son, I told my son a little bit, as much as I could. He's 16. I told him a little bit about it. Like, hey, listen, because one day I caught him watching a movie and then just talking about sex. Talking about, hey, man, it's okay to be attracted to a woman. Sexual desire is great. For me, I'm like, God gave it. So he's like, that feels good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. Sexual desire is okay. Lusting is different. So I try to help understand those two different dichotomies, and also like that is not the direction you want to go.
For sure. No, I really appreciate you opening up on that. And you had said that there are very few situations where there are almost no situations where pornography is good, and I lean much towards there are no situations, not almost no situations, but I would be open to someone trying to explain to me how there's a situation where it's good, but I'm 99% certain I'll be able to fight back on it. But because there's just so much. Even if you can come to me and say there's zero shame, my wife and I watch it together, all the stuff, and okay, well, let's look at the negative on the other side of the camera then, right? Let's forget about what your portion is. If you want to completely convince yourself there's no negative on your portion, there's still something on the other side of that camera. So, like,
hey, would you want your daughter to be there?
Yeah, exactly. And if I could go down a whole rabbit hole of that, but yes, yeah. But Pete, I have greatly appreciated our conversation. I thank you so very much for jumping on. It was an absolute pleasure getting to know you a little bit more, going into realms that I don't think we've touched at all on this podcast yet. But if folks want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure talking, and went down a couple different rabbit holes and beautiful things that I think are really important for men. So a lot probably thrown in today. But I want to say, if people want to reach out to me, and especially men, I invite men just to have a conversation with me first and foremost. I love connecting with men. It doesn't, you don't have to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm interested in working with you. Just reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Tell me about you. Tell me about you. Tell me your story. I love helping offer any advice where I can just hear something, give you, hey man, here's a little something. Have you consider this? Like with you today, right? Like, I don't expect you to work with me, Adam. This is when I'm with a man. Hey, this is what I can provide right now today. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm trying to do. So I encourage men to reach out to me if they have any questions on my journey, share their struggles, whatever it is. You can reach out to me by email, PeteInspires, one word, @gmail.com. That's my email address. You can see me on LinkedIn, Pete Armstrong. I'm on Instagram, Pete J. Armstrong, and Facebook as well. I will be clear and honest. My social media presence isn't as consistent as it will be someday. I'm 3 years into my business, almost 3 years into my business, and I spend a lot more time developing relationships with men and other potential partners. So social media is not the avenue that I spend a lot of time on. I'd rather get to know people and meet people. I'd rather do this than post something on LinkedIn, for example. Yeah. It takes a little longer, but I think it can provide more value to the people listening.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all of those links in the show notes. But thank you again, Pete, so very much for jumping on. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you a bit, going down a few different rabbit holes that were fun. I appreciate your authenticity and engagement. And I'm sure everybody listening does as well. And speaking of those listening, please, if you can, like, subscribe, follow Pete, reach out to him. Again, just a chat. Just to get to know him a little bit more as well, so he get to know you. But thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for joining the next show, and we'll see everybody on the next one.